Okay, it is 12:05, so we'll go ahead and get started. If folks want to find your seats. Well, thank you. I really like seeing all these faces because I know there's a lot of stuff going on. So thank you for being here, and hopefully you'll get to learn something. And if you're heading out to any of the rallies, protests today, be safe. And hopefully you have some understanding or an idea of what stuff is happening related to those protests. So again, thank you. My name is Itzel Vargas. I am the program director at AIR. That's Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation. And I'm gonna explain really quick who we are, but I also just wanna say first, thank you to the Lawrence Public Library for having us here. We've been planning this since like the beginning of the year, right? With Sanctuary Alliance, who's also in the back. Make sure you stop by the table, have some resources, and they'll come up after to talk about our action or like call to action. So, AIR, has anybody heard of AIR before? Seen our post? Yay, thank you. So we are in Kansas City. So I drove here from KC today, and I have to head out pretty soon because I have another event happening right after. But we are a nonprofit organization in Kansas City, and really our mission is to activate and organize the immigrant community. We are impacted led. So you can see some of the pictures where our staff are immigrants or children of immigrants, or many of our board members are immigrants themselves. We truly believe that the people closest to the problem are closest to a solution, and we want to empower and develop the leadership of our immigrant community to continue taking lead in the movement. So we are about movement change, systems change. We do that through the different or two branches of our work. So there's a program stuff because we also acknowledge that there's a lot of need with the immigrant community, right? We can't ignore the needs that exist that are very difficult to manage. A lot of it is legal assistance, legal help. Now, we're not attorneys, we don't offer legal assistance, but we have the connections to attorneys or other organizations that do provide that legal financial assistance. We have our Know Your Rights program, which is something we've been doing for years. It's not something new. How obviously in this current climate, it is very high in demand. But it is not new. It is something we've been doing for a very long time, and one of our key pillars for our organization, which is education of the community. Then we have our Immigration 101s, which is what we'll be doing today. And we cover what the immigration system is like, what it covers. We have our accompaniment program, which I would kind of describe it as our only direct service. So we have our volunteers that are trained to go to ICE check-ins, immigration court with people, so they're not alone in that process. And if something happens, then somebody can be notified quickly. If you've been following the news, unfortunately, that's been happening. That was like something we predicted would happen, especially with our asylum seekers from the past 2 years. Once expedited removal, and I'll talk about that, explain that a little bit later, got expanded, we were really afraid that they were going to target those newcomers that have been here in the country list in the past 3 years. And that's what's been happening in the courts. So right now, like our accompaniment and rapid response team has been at the immigration court for the last 3 weeks, just court watching, along with some of our local attorneys, and passing out Know Your Rights information in case that the Department of Homeland Security wants to terminate their cases, which then allows them for ICE to arrest them. And then we have the Rapid Response Network. Our network is very much Kansas City focused, all Kansas City Metro. And at the end, again, Sanctuary Alliance will talk about what that's looking like here for Lawrence. On the advocacy side, we really, being a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan. So we don't do party advocacy or candidates, anything like that. It is really just about policy, both policy that is beneficial for the community and policy that is harmful for the community. Some examples when I started, shortly after I started with AIR, there was a very confusing bill that entered the Kansas legislature, HB 2350. And I don't know if you all heard about it. And so we were doing a lot of advocacy against that bill. And I see some people shaking their heads. That bill was kind of a copycat of that Florida bill that would criminalize people transporting, harboring, or concealing undocumented immigrants. The Kansas one is not as bad as the Florida one or the Texas one, but it's still kind of harmful. And so we were doing a lot of advocacy, providing testimony at the state legislature for things like that. Now, we also work on the Missouri side, so we're also pretty active in legislative season in the Missouri state legislature. You probably, on the Missouri side, heard about the bounty hunter bill. If you didn't, Missouri introduced a bounty hunter bill that would allow for private citizens to be deputized to hunt immigrants and be paid $1,000 per person that was arrested. Thankfully, that bill did not make it far. It had a hearing. We brought about 20 people, like AIR brought about 20 people to go and testify, and overall over 60 people testified against that bill. It did not go anywhere. Even the House, it was introduced in the Senate, the House was not interested in pursuing it. So a lot of our advocacy is really like reactive and defensive to try to stop some of these harmful bills, both on the Kansas and Missouri side. And then, like I said, community organizing and working on campaigns. Again, leading with immigrants, leading those campaigns. Right now, our most active one is the Leavenworth Detention Center with Core Civic, trying to continue stopping that. We know that's in the courts. We have a small win so far with the courts deciding on favor of the city of Leavenworth, but we'll see how much we can do to actually stop it, considering that sometimes these companies really don't care about what citizens say. Okay, before I go on to the next one, I want to just kind of start with like a personal story so that there's a bit more understanding of how things work and don't work. So I am from Mexico. I came here when I was 11 in 2003. So I have been here 23 years, close to 23 years, in December. And I was very privileged. I would say my immigration story is a very privileged one because I was able to come with a visa. And that is not something that everybody has a chance to, honestly. We get lost a lot of times in the discourse of like people just should come the legal way without understanding that the legal way is very strict and it's a very privileged way. We were able to qualify for that visa, I think by pure luck, and we overstayed. And so once you overstay your visa, you eventually are in violation of that visa and become out of status, or what other people also say undocumented. You, by all means, even if you came the legal way, become undocumented. I grew up undocumented for a very long time, and I was always told not to tell people what my status was or how we came to the country. My family always say, just tell people that you have permission to be here, like very, very vague. And so growing up, there was always that distrust of like, when my teachers asked me things and they were trying to be helpful, but I didn't know if I could share. But I really didn't understand what it meant. And I think it was my freshman year of high school, towards the end, I was taking French classes and I was in the French club. And there was a trip, if for anybody maybe remember, they do like those high school trips to Europe, and you go for like 2 weeks and it's everything paid, and you get, it was like a dream, right, for me. Like I was like, oh, that's so cool. And so then I take the information packet to my mom, and she's reading it, and she's like, oh yeah, it's not very expensive. And I knew we weren't, we're definitely like low income, but I was thinking, oh, maybe like if we say we can afford it. But then she looked at me really sad. I could see the sadness in her face, and she said, if you can't go. And I was like, why? You just said it's not that expensive. And she's like, it's not about the money. If you leave, you can't come back. That was when I realized what being undocumented is. For me, in my circumstance, was you can dream big, but you're not allowed to have those dreams. You can come to the land of opportunity, but you can't have those dreams. Fast forward to my senior year of high school, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't know if I could go to college here. It was my senior year. I had not applied to any universities. I had not looked. I had not done everything that you're supposed to do by your senior year, not even my junior year, because we didn't know what was available, what was possible. And I would say not a lot of my teachers or counselors were very helpful, because it's just stuff that sometimes counselors don't know and educators don't know. And so thankfully, there were some people that came into my school at the time that introduced me to events in Kansas City, such as like BizFest, KC BizFest, which is like a 4-year program for Latino students. It's like an entrepreneurship, and you go and do your business plan. But it was very helpful because it introduced me to organizations in the area that were working to get Latino students to higher education. And so that way I learned that Kansas has in-state tuition law. They were trying to repeal it earlier this year. And that was one of the things, again, we were fighting. And I was able to pay in-state tuition. I knew that I probably couldn't get a lot of scholarships, so I started working early. My mom, we were saving together, eventually made it to college, still undocumented, went to Johnson County Community College, started there, figuring out what we were gonna do. Forgot to mention, well, during that time, we're figuring out if I could go or not. My mom and I considered that I should just go back to Mexico so that I could go to school. So, just to be away from my family so I could go to school. I have still a lot of family in Mexico, so that would not be the problem, but I would have been separated from my mom and my siblings. But we decided no, we're just gonna figure out here. My junior year, towards the end of, sophomore year, DACA comes along. And so currently, since 2012, I have had DACA. And I'll explain again. DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It is a temporary status with no pathway for citizenship at all. It gives me a work permit and defense of being deported, so that's the deferred action, the deportation. So it's basically the government saying, we know you're here, you're brought here as a child, here's a work permit so you can renew it every 2 years. I kind of joke that it's my most expensive subscription to the United States. I have to pay every 2 years to stay. And then currently, with the things the way are, DACA renewals are taking a long time. You can't, if you're a new applicant, you can't really apply. It's only available for renewals because it's being attacked by the Trump administration since the first time. So it's just that, and that's where we're at. It's just a limbo status, very much like there's so many other limbo statuses that I'll explain. So all that just to say, just wanted to share like where I'm at and how those experiences have led me to be where I am today and do the work that I'm doing today. Because it's very personal. It's about me. It's about my family. It's about my child. I have a small child that I need to figure out what's gonna happen to her if I lose my DACA and I get deported. So it's about the defense of my own family. And I say that because, again, when we talk about community organizing, we want to find out the why we do things. And so I think as you learn today, like I really want you to think about what is your why that you're here? And what is the why that you're gonna go to the protest? What is the why that you're fighting for? That's really important for us to understand so that we know that we're really in the fight that we believe in. So yeah. So we're gonna talk about the I word. If you heard me throughout this whole experience, I never used the I word. I even try to talk to my family about not using the I word. A lot of times immigrant communities, we still call ourselves illegal. Like, oh, ese mojado, that wetback. We call ourselves slurs. And it's something really deep that we have to like not do. A deep fight that we have to do with our community. But having that conversation of like why we don't, even the word illegal, humans are not illegal. Humans are not defined by their status or lack of status in a country. Humans are not objects, right? So it's dehumanizing, and it facilitates a lot of the things that were happening. When we continue using the words, the terms, it continues to allow for the discrimination, the harmful, the clear violations of due process that we are seeing. Because when it's easy to do it and test it on one population, then we can see how far it can be pushed. So yeah, use other terms like undocumented, unauthorized. I believe attorneys use iwi, enter without inspection, just a term that attorneys use. I'm going to zoom in on this, just a brief history, because I think it's also important to understand how the system was built. I think a lot of times we say, when we talk about immigration reform and the fight for immigration reform, we say, oh, the system is broken. But if we look back, we realize that the United States immigration system, from the very beginning, was built to keep people out. It wasn't a system that was built to welcome people in. So in the late 1700s, the US is a very new nation. Anybody could apply to be a citizen. Not anybody, right? Free white persons of good character, okay, could apply for citizenship. There was no restrictions other than you had to be white. Again, who was it keeping out? We know who was kept out of this until the abolition of slavery and the 14th Amendment. And then in the early 1800s, we start seeing large waves of immigration from Western Europe mostly, and then also some Asian folks, right? We start seeing Chinese folks migrate to the United States, primarily that California area, right? That's why, and they helped build our railroads. Not helped, or maybe sort of forced to build our railroads. But I wouldn't say like migration from the Western European countries was highly favored, right? So there was no restrictions for the English and the French and maybe the Spanish, I don't know, to come. It was largely favored. And towards the 1800s, the late 1800s, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, a very, very first actual act to restrict immigration, okay? And then we fast forward to the 1900s. And that's when we start seeing quotas based on nationality. Now, at this point, we start seeing also Eastern Europeans start coming to the country, some Southern Europeans too. So we see large migrations of Italians, of the Irish, and those were countries that were not seen as favorable, not favorable white people, right? And so then the quotas are enacted, and there's also literacy requirements that begin to be put in place so that you could have legal immigration, especially for Asian countries, and like I said, some of those Southern and Eastern European countries. Now, what happens in the early 1900s, right? First, we have World War I, and then we have World War II. So something that also was happening in the early 1900s, post-World War I, was what was called Operation Wetback. That's where the term wetback comes from. And it was a policy to kick out Mexicans or people who looked Mexican from the country. And this is, so again, if we know a little bit of her history, so late 1800s, the US acquires the territories from Mexico, right? So obviously there's a large Mexican population in those areas, from Texas, all the Southwest, right? So then we have this policy to deport anybody who looked Mexican. And a lot of times those included citizens. So this is not the first time the United States has deported citizens, okay? It has happened before. There was also lynching of Mexicans, and that's something that often is not talked about when we talk about the American history of lynching. So that's happening early 1900s. We get to World War II, and then we have all people go to the war, right? And then who's working? We need people to build the weapons and continue working on the farms. And then the woman, that's when, women get working on some of those jobs. But there's still a job, there's still workforce needs. So then we get the Bracero program, which brings Mexican workers back, probably a lot of them who were deported, they were able to come back and work for those labor shortages. Now, a lot of those people have stayed since. A lot of when we think about our areas with long histories of Chicano, heritage. Like I'm thinking about like Dodge, Liberal, Garden City, right? A lot of those cities that are very heavily, yes, Latino, but specifically Mexican American, Chicano, are because of the Bracero program and everything that was happening then. Same with certain neighborhoods in Kansas City, like the West Side. So that brings workers back, but it did not really change a lot of the sentiments. Now, again, that's in the 1940s, right? And the Bracero program went up to the 1960s. And then what's happening in the 1960s? Civil rights movement, right? A lot of times we don't think about how specifically Chicanos were involved in the civil rights movement, and they were. We had the equivalent for the Black Panthers of the Chicano movement was the Brown Berets. They were doing a lot. We had the Suit riots too in this period, and that's just when the army attacked, I think it was the Navy specifically, attacked Mexican Americans. So there was a lot happening, right? The civil rights movement. And then finally, in 1965, we end national quotas with an emphasis on family reunification, because once the Bracero program ended and deportation started happening again, a lot of families were separated. Now, we fast forward to the 80s and Donald Reagan. Reagan was actually the last person to have large immigration reform. It was the last time immigration reform happened. What basically happened, there's something also, in the 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act was passed. That's how some of those quotas were ended, and what we currently know as immigration law was codified. So then in that act, there's a section that says that people who have been in the country for more than 10 years after a certain date can apply for a green card, right? So all that Reagan did was update that date. That was the reform that happened. And I really want to emphasize, because that's something so easy that can be done today to provide a pathway for citizenship for millions of people. And since 1986, our Congress has not been able to do it again. So I say Reagan, but I was actually the whole Congress at the time. Congress approved this amendment, changed the date, Ronald Reagan signed it, and about 3 million people were able to obtain status. Some of my own family members that had been here since the 80s were able to obtain status that way. So yeah. Then the next big thing that happened immigration-wise was in 96. So under Clinton, Congress passed another act, and I forgot the full acronym for this, but it's the IIRIRA, which basically it did different things, but one of the big ones is the punishments. It created punishments for people who were here undocumented. So if you ever, basically the way it works, it's if you've been here, I think if you accumulate 3 months of being undocumented in the country, it's a 3-year bar if you get deported. I think if you go up to 6 months, it's 6 years or 5 years, something like that. If you've been here more than a year than undocumented, it's a 10-year bar. So then if you ever like work with immigrants and people who are like working to adjust their status, if they entered the country without authorization, they have to ask for that pardon so that they don't get that 10-year bar. Because when they leave to the U.S. consulate in Juarez and try to obtain their status at their consulate, it triggers that 10-year bar. And if they don't get it approved, they cannot come back in for 10 years. Again, that is somebody trying to obtain status. So that was one of the things that that the Clinton administration did with this act. The other thing that this act does, it created restrictions for who could apply for benefits. And I'm specifically talking about legal immigrants. So some legal immigrants, especially green card holders, once you get your green card, you still have to wait 5 years before you could apply for disability, for Medicaid, Social Security, anything. Even if you need it, you cannot apply for it until you've been a resident for 5 years, permanent resident. And then it really strengthened the criminalization and deportation of certain people. So that was a lot. I was trying to summarize it as much as I could. Any questions there? Don't feel like you can't ask questions or at any point. Okay. Yeah.
Wasn't there something passed during the, oh, and I can't, the Carter presidency that allowed some people to come in?
I think it might have been like I believe the refugee, like the Refugee Act that started allowing for refugees to come in might have been in his administration. I forgot the exact year of when that happened. Yeah. All right, we're gonna go to the next slide. So I kind of talked about during this like history part how some laws are created. Again, I'm gonna zoom in because I know these are small, hard to read. So when we talk about how creating immigration reform or creating legal pathways for immigration, it's always really hard because we say, oh, Congress has to pass something. And I just kind of explained what exactly, right? Just changing a date in the INA, that's all we have to do. Or something else, another act, or like the DREAM Act, something, right? And it has to go through Congress. So to get our Congress to agree on something, especially for the past 20 years, has just been very difficult. So then why do laws change so much, right? If only Congress can change immigration law, why do things change? Because they change a lot. So again, Congress can pass laws, but then there's also executive orders, right? And the reason is that things can change through executive orders is because immigration is housed under the executive branch, right? It's under the Department of Homeland Security. That's the executive branch, right? So then any executive order or any way that the current administration or whatever administration is in power interprets the law, it changes it. Because that's going to change on, each person, each individual is going to have a different perception of what the law is supposed to say, but then we also have political agendas, right, that change what that interpretation is. So that's why things change so much. And obviously, we have seen so many orders in the last 6 months. I cannot remember all of them on the top of my head, but like some of the ones that come to mind is again that expedited removal. Um, and what expedited removal does, it was something that already existed at the border. The border is a 100-mile jurisdiction, right? So it's not just like where the wall is, right? It includes cities from that line 100 miles inland. Now, we're not just talking about the southern border, we're talking about the northern border with Canada, and it includes the states that border the Great Lakes. It includes our coastal states. So that basically, the perimeter of the United States, all of it, is under the Border Patrol jurisdiction in that 100-mile zone. That essentially covers, like, if we look at a map, it covers all of Michigan, it covers all of Florida, all of those little tiny states up in the East Coast. It's a large, I think, can't remember the number, but I think like two out of three people in the country live in that zone. It's where our most populated cities are, right? So just keep that in mind. So that's a large area, and usually where a lot of immigrants go. So expedited removal existed in that zone. And basically, if you got stopped by Border Patrol and they suspected that you were in the country for less than 2 weeks, you would be detained and deported without seeing a judge. Okay? That has been expanded through an executive order for the whole country. So now, but now for 2 years. So if you cannot prove that you've been in the country for more than 2 years, you will be detained and deported without seeing a judge. Why is that allowed to overpass due process? I don't know. Your question's as good as mine. Your answer is as good as mine. Yeah. So we're recommending people carry certain documents with them. Obviously, nothing that can have too much personal information, like things like if you're going through a petition with immigration and it's been more than 2 years since you've had that petition, once you send something, you get a receipt letter. And so carry that. You can, school records, church records, vaccination records, anything, rental agreements or mortgage agreements that can prove when you buy your home. It's basically a carry your papers policy. We're also asking people to carry their ID, whatever that is. If they have a visa, carry your visa with you. If you have a green card, carry your green card with you, so that you can prove how long you've been in the country. You had a question too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. Again, Congress passes something, and so whatever executive order or interpretation of law is not supposed to overpass, right? Not just like Congress and like in this area would be the INA, but also the Constitution. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but in my opinion, expedited removal It's a direct attack to the Fifth Amendment and due process, and the 14th Amendment also, right? So that's where a lot of that litigation from our national organizations come in and sue. So far, there's been no lawsuits against the expedited removal um, executive order, but for example, there was towards the ending birthright citizenship, because he can't just do that with an executive order. That's in the Constitution. Um, Same with some other policies. So yes, it should be limited, but that's where we're getting where it's not being limited, either by Congress or the courts or wherever the balance of power is supposed to be. Yeah, exactly. And then we have government agencies. So again, what I was saying about interpretation and then how they interpret those regulations. So then in this case, DHS and whoever's leading DHS right now, however they interpret the law, is how they're gonna change policies, specific policies. Again, it's not supposed to overreach. And that's where a lot of the things that we are seeing, there is some overreach happening. How do we fight it, right? Contacting legislators is one. Are there other ways? Lawsuits, which brings to the next one, case law. So again, if there's a lawsuit, for example, I'm gonna use DACA as an example that's been in the courts for the last, 80 years. If right now it's in it keeps going back to the courts because the conservative attorney generals, including ours, don't believe it's legal, and they're trying to say that it's taking too much from the state resources, and so then they keep suing it, try to say it's unconstitutional, that the DACA program is unconstitutional. It's already gone up to the Supreme Court once, and they ruled in favor of DACA because like technicalities. But if it were up to go again, or even if it doesn't make it to the Supreme Court, just in the federal courts, whatever court decides, it's what it is, and then it becomes the new policy. So again, these are like all the ways that things work in the immigration system and why things change so much without the help of Congress all the time. So we're just going to talk about some of those different statuses and categories and what they mean. First, I want to show you this chart. So this is from 2022. As you know, sometimes data and research is a few years behind. So the latest data is from 2022. And total number of immigrants, we made the math the other day in another presentation. So we've got foreign-born people, right? Whether they have status or not. So I have 23 million or so who are citizens, who have become citizens. And then we have 11.5 who are permanent residents. That's your green card holders. And then we have 2 million or so who are temporary lawful residents. Those are gonna be people here on like work visas, student visas, any like specialty visa like that where it's a temporary status. And then we have our unauthorized migrants. I would say I believe DACA is also included in the temporary statuses. So it includes our limbo statuses. It depends. It depends what their current status is. Some asylum seekers have TPS, which might have been taken away. Some have parole, and that's a permanent status. Parole is another of those permanent statuses. Some asylum seekers were people that maybe came here on a student visa or a work visa, and then things got really bad in their country, and so they stay and apply for asylum. It's just even the asylum seeker category is very wide and range, and it's not a very specific, way that an asylum seeker is. Yeah. So then we're gonna talk about family-based immigration. It's like the most common way that people obtain status. And I'm gonna use my example again, my family. So we, like I said earlier, we enter with a visa, so I have a legal entry. And when it comes to adjusting status, sometimes that's all that matters. Did you have a legal entry or did you not? Because then it makes the process easier. So let's say I do have a legal entry. And then about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, my mom married a US citizen. So because we all enter with a visa, so my stepdad is the US citizen, right? And my mom is the spouse. Um, if my grandparents were alive at the time, they would have maybe qualified. And then we have child unmarried under 21. I was 21 when they got married. My brother was 18, but to be considered a child of the US citizen, you have to be 18 or less. Okay? So it was and then my sister was 16, 15, 16. So the only person, or the only people in my direct family who were able to obtain status through the marriage to my stepdad were my mom and my younger sister. And both my brother and I stayed on DACA. Now, my brother has married a US citizen, so now he became this category, and he has his green card now, too. So they're the only people in my family who have status, and I have DACA. Now, I mentioned that I have a child, so I'm in this category too. But for my child to petition me, she has to be 21. Now, when my mom's going through the U.S. citizen, through the naturalization process, she just started it finally. So then that would make me a child to the U.S. citizen. However, because I am a married son or daughter of U.S. citizen, I become in this category. And because we're from Mexico, and the majority of petitions are from Mexicans, I think the top 3 countries are China, Mexico, India, and the Philippines. If I had never married, let's say I had been with my partner but never married, I would have been in this category. Still 20 years through my mom. 20 years through my mom, 20 years through my mom, 20 years plus through my brother or sister, because we're from Mexico. It's a lot. The quotas and the wait times will vary depending on where you're from and then what category. So always the fastest way is through the marriage of a U.S. citizen. So right now at this point, my daughter is about to be 4. 17 more years to wait for her to petition me, unless something happens in Congress. That's like my only option. So I just wanted to use, again, my family example for that now. A little more on a serious, less successful pathway. My partner, my spouse, is also a DACA recipient, but he did not enter with a visa. He was 8 years old when he crossed the desert. He's still the parent of a U.S. citizen, but because he does not have a legal entry, he has to go through that consular process that I was talking about, where when he petitions, he has to leave, and if they don't give him the pardon, that's a 10-year bar. A child cannot ask for the pardon for their parents. Only a spouse can. So the other way is I become a citizen when my kid is able to petition for me. I wait 5 years for being a green card holder, become a citizen, and then after that, I petition for my husband and then ask for the pardon. Only spouses can ask for the pardon. The only other way that a child can ask for the pardon is if the child joins the military. Go die so that your parents can stay, right? look, I'm like, it's funny, but like cruel, right? It's so cruel. Um, there's like no other way for at this point. And I just want to emphasize there's many people like me. People don't want to be undocumented. If there was a pathway that made it easy, people would be. If as a lot of unfortunate people in the opposition think that you can just walk into the DMV and be like, hey, I want to be a citizen. If it was that easy, that number on the chart would be bigger, right? This number would be bigger. Yeah.
Now, not previous charges, is that different from change migration, immigration?
From what?
Change.
What do you mean? What do you mean by chain?
Well, that's how, like Trump's wife became, and she brought her parents.
That's family-based migration, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I always understood that if a non-citizen married a U.S. citizen, the first person becoming a citizen was pretty well a given, and now I'm hearing that that may not be it.
It all depends on each person's case. And again, a big one will depend on if you have a legal entry or not. Yeah. Then we have the second most common way people obtain status is through employment-based immigration. So that's when, you know, again, people who are here on work visas, and there's all different categories for work visas. These are just some of them. But these, I believe these are the ones that are able to lead to a green card more easy or faster. So we have the EB ones, and forgive me, I don't know what the quotas are for the work visas. I'm much more familiar with the family base, again, because it's my experience. But, and I would say, does not include the diversity visa category. We do have a diversity lottery that opens up every year. So if you're from a country that we just don't have a lot of people from, and you apply and you get the lot, it's literally win the lottery, and you're able to come with a green card. So we do have that. So we have these categories. So we have our extraordinary ability, you know, professors, researchers that come, and then they're able to, after some time, apply for a green card. And then we have our advanced degrees, and then skilled worker professionals. I think EB3s is people like, I think for like servers, some union jobs maybe, just some that are considered skilled workers. Special immigrants, I think, includes like diplomats, like church positions, you know, like religious leaders, things like that, and then employment creation visas. Again, just another chart. So like I mentioned, through family relatives is usually the most common way that people get a green card. And then, so immediate relatives to US citizens. I think the difference between this blue and the orange is like family-based. So again, if like my sister or my brother petition for me, then, or like, you know, sibling petitions basically would fall in that category. Third, we have employment-based. Then we have our refugees and asylees. Just a very small percentage as opposed to maybe what the administration tries to say. And then diversity lottery, only about 4%. And then other, whatever those other categories may be. So here are some of those other categories. So I mentioned non-immigrant temporary workers, visitors, students, diplomats, or people from the media. Also, like, think of artists, you know, that are touring through the U.S. or not from here. There was actually pretty recently a Mexican band, like a regional Mexican band who was coming up on their tour, I believe, starting this summer, and all of their visas did not just get denied, got canceled. They had their visa, they were going to renew some of them, and they were canceled. So they're doing some of that. Then we have some of our humanitarian statuses. So again, DACA is considered a humanitarian status. We have our U visas. Those are people who were victims of serious crimes. that collaborated with law enforcement, and were able, after some time, to apply for a green card. That was the reason why that visa was created, because a lot of immigrants were witnesses or victims of serious crimes and were not coming forward to talk about it because they were afraid that law enforcement was going to turn them over to immigration. So the U visa was created um, to help with that, and it's been very successful, to the point where now there's a 10-year wait for the visa because there's a backlog. We have our T visas, that's for people who are victims of trafficking, human trafficking. TPS, temporary protected status. And again, refugees or asylees. And cancellation of removal. That's if you're in removal proceedings in the court and the judge says, like, okay, I'm gonna cancel this and you were able to stay in the United States. Sometimes, I don't know how that works, but sometimes you can eventually apply for a green card that way. So that's really important to know, because as our community continues to be under attack and detained, that's why it's really important. In our Know Your Rights, we teach people, like, hey, if you're detained and it's your very first time being detained, you've never had a deportation order before, never been deported before, you can fight this in the court. And a lot of times people don't know that. And some of them may be able to qualify for that cancellation of removal. I believe you have to be in the country for more than 10 years to qualify for that. And then the undocumented population, which so that was an EWI term that I said attorneys use: enter without inspection, or people who overstayed their visa like me, or that statuses were revoked. We saw earlier this year a lot of students had their statuses revoked. They were reinstated, but those students for that time were by all means undocumented. And I know it happened here in KU, it happened all over, universities all over. So some of the current policies, kind of been talking about some of them. So we talked about expedited removal, which is right now one of our main concerns, and why we have volunteers in the court, in the immigration court, who are court watching, ensuring that people are not being detained after they have their cases closed by the court. We have just a lot of things happening. I was sharing with our friends at Sanctuary and Gabby at the library that it was a very heavy week. We had a lot of activity in Kansas City this week, all over. Literally, they had us running all over the metro, all the way from the Northland to South Johnson County. And I think, so it's just some things to be aware of what we're seeing, patterns that we're seeing. Well, first of all, I'm sure you've all seen that agents are masking up. They're not identifying themselves. They're supposed to. When you ask them for identification, they're not identifying themselves. They're not showing badges or any like that. They're showing up without warrants. A lot of the times they don't have a warrant to enter private property or to make the arrest, because it's a long bureaucratic process and they don't want to have to go through it. They have earlier this year, their quota was 1,500 arrests per day. I believe that's been raised to 3,000 arrests per day. It's just a lot. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of this heavier detention the last few weeks. So they're going without arrest, without a warrant. They're going at the courts. They're detaining people at their check-ins in the ICE office. They usually, in the past, they've always been known for having unmarked cars or dressing up in civilian clothes and just showing up to like municipal courts, for example. So both in Kansas and Missouri, we don't give driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants, right? So if an immigrant gets detained or pulled over by the police for speeding, or failing to stop something, they get a ticket for that traffic violation, and then they get a ticket for driving without a license. And that's not something that you can just pay like you do. You just get online and pay your ticket. When you get a ticket for no license, you have to go to the court to pay, like plead guilty and pay, essentially. um, but you pay it at the court. But once you do that, that puts your name in the system. And sometimes ICE will track those cases of no license because it's a pretty good assumption that that means that person is probably don't have status. So then they show up to the court and waiting in civilian clothes and make arrest. That's another way that it's happened. So civilian clothes, not showing badges, civilian cars, usually big cars like SUVs, all blacked out windows with regular plates, nothing that says that they're a federal agent. In the past, we knew that usually we could assume they have American-made cars. Usually law enforcement uses American-made cars, Fords, GMCs, Chevys. But we're seeing some Nissans, Hyundais, at least in some of the detentions in Kansas City, either changing the tactics or, I don't know, maybe just don't have enough budget. I don't know. So we are seeing some different type of cars being used. Some things to keep in mind. You have a question? Yeah. Oh, that was it, I think.
You might be talking about 287G.
Yes.
I'm curious if what you know about anybody in the Kansas City metro, any local police departments or counties that have signed on so far.
Yeah.
I know the counties in Kansas, but I don't know anything about Missouri.
Yeah, thank you. That was the other thing. I knew I was missing something. So as far as collaboration with local law enforcement and ICE, so a 287G agreement is an agreement signed between local law enforcement and ICE to essentially deputize the local law enforcement to work as ICE or aid ICE in things. We have I think most of the agreements on the Kansas side are for, because there's different levels, are for detention. So Chase County has one, and that's where people go when they're detained. That's just outside of Emporia. And the KBI signed one earlier this year. That's all I know of as far as agreements. Neither any of the Johnson County, thankfully we have a new sheriff in Johnson County that's a lot more friendly than the one that was there previously. But there's no agreement that we know of, no none with any of the local city police departments, neither Wyandotte County or KCK. On the Missouri side, the Highway Patrol has an agreement. And we've already seen, KCUR posted an article about this, Kansas City, Kansas man who was going to KCMO to work, and he was detained, stopped by the Highway Patrol and detained, even though he was going through a U visa process. And USCIS had already said that it was essentially approved. They were just waiting for some visas to open so he can actually get it. So that's what we know in Missouri. They also have some detention centers with like, what's the name? Greene County in Missouri, which is where Springfield, Missouri is. And I recently heard of Rolla, Missouri. Rolla, thank you. Thinking my Spanish brain. Yeah, so those two. On Kansas too, another thing to be aware of. I know we know that Core Civic and Leavenworth trying to open, but currently there's about 80 people being detained in the federal prison for basically, I think they're just waiting for Core Civic to open so they can transfer them over. We have immigrant detainees in a federal prison. And I think there was an article too by the Kansas City Star that came out of like the horrible conditions that they're being treated as opposed to the other inmates. Like there's a clear difference of how they're treated. Yes, I think that's it for like local stuff happening. Obviously there's a lot, but I think, like I said earlier, I want to bring you back to to your why and why you're here today. If you're going to protest, why are you going to protest? If you care about immigrant issues, why do you care about immigrant issues? Like, really focus on your why, and let's do something. So I'm gonna ask Mariel to come up here from Sanctuary Alliance, because yes, obviously we would love if you want to do something with AIR, but I want to make it clear, like, there's organizations here that you have here locally that are doing amazing work, and so Mariel is gonna talk about it.
Thank you, Itzel. Give Itzel a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Mariel Ferredo. I am with Sanctuary Alliance. We're a Lawrence, Douglas County-based immigrant advocacy organization founded in 2018-ish. So we've been around for a little bit, have partnered with AirKC for a long, long time, so they're wonderful and great partners. I'm here to talk to you about local stuff. What can you do? You've obviously gotten a ton of information on the history of immigration. My family actually fell in the amnesty, Reagan, Clinton era, so I want to say first and foremost, we were incredibly lucky. That it was pure luck and purely the political will of Congress at that time, and how simple, just like Itzel said, how simple is it for Congress to act? The only way that we have to change the immigration system is to create actual pathways of citizenship for people. That is it. We need to stop being on the defensive side, because even if we get rid of ICE, right, and we are here for that, even if we stop the mass deportation efforts that are currently happening, that does not end the story for us. That does not suddenly make everything better. We will still have millions of people without status and without a way to get to citizenship if they choose to do that, right? So, very important information. I'm so glad you all got a little taste. It's very convoluted and confusing, and it changes all the time. That's not the fun part about it. But I have a couple things. You might have noticed the back table that has a lot of information. So I'm going to go through all of that, and then we'll give you all an opportunity to go through that area, get some information. You're welcome to ask us questions, but I'm here to give you some calls to action. So first and foremost, I'll talk about Lawrence, Kansas. Not the county quite yet, but Lawrence, Kansas does currently have an ordinance that we as Sanctuary Alliance deem a sanctuary ordinance. That is Ordinance 9920. This particular ordinance was passed in 2020 in order to limit the city's interaction with federal immigration enforcement, and basically kind of draw a line in the sand and say, we do not do the will of the federal administration, any administration, as you can tell. It's both sides of the administration throughout history. It's not one in particular, but those can, vary in their aggressiveness. So we passed that ordinance in 2020. Unfortunately, a few years later, the state of Kansas preempted much of our ordinance through House Bill 2717 that essentially required law enforcement to comply if federal immigration enforcement was requesting their services. So that part of our ordinance had to be heavily edited. Unfortunately, we did try to fight for that, but it was ultimately the will of our commissioners to be compliant with the state law. What I have here and what is in the back is an explanation of what still stands in our ordinance. The ordinance was not stricken completely, so the primary parts of this and why I think we're very firm in this ordinance is because we do state throughout the entire ordinance, unless stated by federal law, we are very clear that we are not going to intervene or interact with federal law, but we are going to continue to draw that line in the sand as much as we can without state preemption. A couple of these are basics. Our law enforcement as stands does not do the work of federal immigration. They will not be doing immigration stops. They will not be collecting information. So says an ordinance. And I say that, so says an ordinance. I am not a police officer. I do not work for the police. So I cannot do their willing, but it is stated in ordinance that they are not to do the bidding of federal immigration enforcement unless requested. So if ICE or any sort of Department of Homeland Security requests their assistance, they do have to comply per state statute. Our city and their employees do not have to collect immigration information. We have made that very clear, that we do not, unless needed for any sort of legal reason. So think of an employment process for the city. Sometimes you have to fill out an I-9, which is verifying that you are able to work in the country. That is an example of when you would provide any sort of documentation. But other than that, you're not going to go up to the city and they're going to ask you for your papers, and they can't do that unless they have a legal reason to. The rest of this just goes into a little bit more detail of what we have put in place. If any of this ordinance were changed, the police also have some administrative policy that falls into this. They have to give us notice if they're going to change any part of this ordinance. I know that there has been some concern with some letters that the federal government have given Lawrence to stop for, not public charge, my brain's in public charge, protected classes, there we go. So we saw that with a potential resolution that the city of Lawrence put forward. They would have to talk to us about that, Sanctuary Alliance specifically about that, before ending enforcement. We also have in our Chapter 10 anti-discrimination ordinance, immigration is a protected class. So immigrants cannot be discriminated against when it comes to rental, when it comes to real estate. Chapter 10 covers a lot of things. So it's very important that we stay on our city commission and ensure that protected classes remain and those policies remain enforced. So information, it's also in Spanish because the people who need to know will have that information. Some other things you'll find at the back of the table. So AirKC does have their own rapid response group a hotline that you can call into if you see or spot any sort of immigration. We actually have our own process here in Lawrence. We thought to be more localized and to not strain the resources on AirKC because they're covering the entire KC metro area, and that's a lot. We have established our own rapid response network in partnership with Somos Lawrence. Somos Lawrence is an incredible organization out of the Ballard Center that helps provide resources to non-English speaking communities, primarily focusing on Spanish speaking communities. So they do a lot of great work, but we have partnered with them to create a reporting form. So in the event you see or interact with ICE and they are not detaining you, right? Very important. If they are detaining you, it's another story. You obviously cannot record or do anything to report because you are the one being detained. But if you witness, we would appreciate, rather than you going to social media, rather than you texting all your friends, to verify first. This is crucial. It is very scary out here if you look like you do not have citizenship or you do not have citizenship, right? And we need to know information and verify information as quickly and effectively as possible as a community effort, right? These are people on the ground that know the community, that we know the impacted community. We work with hundreds of families in Lawrence and Douglas County. We know them. We know how to reach out to them. Somos knows them. Somos knows how to reach out to them. This is a trusted source. We will have folks go and verify. We have a whole reporting form. If you scan the QR code, you'll see the form. It'll be in the back too. But essentially, it's asking for details, and that is why I have also provided guidelines for if you interact with ICE. So these little quarter sheets, there's one that's in color that's a little bit different language, and then this one. What do you do if you witness someone or someone's being detained or being interacted with by what you perceive as federal immigration enforcement or ICE? As Itzel said, it used to be that they were very clearly marked, right? They would have a vest that would say police, ICE. They would have vehicles that said DHS or say ICE on them. It's no longer the case. We are seeing people in plain clothes that are masked up. It's really scary because we can't differentiate them from civilians. So if you see something, you have the power and the right to do something, and that something is to record. So this is telling you what to do. Stay at a safe distance. If the officers get too close, move away. You have the right to record, and you have the right to say, I have the right to record, and I'm recording you. Do not go live on social media. Try your very best, maybe not to get the faces of those being detained, but rather focus on the police officers. Can you get that information? Can you get the location? Can you get it date and time stamped? And can you send that information to us so we can verify as quickly as possible and get that information out to our networks? I will say if someone is being detained, the support for them drastically changes, right? They're in need of legal support. We're doing a whole different thing if someone gets detained versus informing the rest of the community that there is an active threat and they need to take the precautions that they have set in place. That is what this is for. We will keep up to date and do our best to make sure that those reports are verified and that we communicate not only to the impacted community, but to you all, so you know what is going on in Lawrence and Douglas County. So that's how to do it, what to do it. I have so many things. The next two things is how can you help? What can you do besides recording? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I am getting ready to talk a little bit. Yes. So we are absolutely Sanctuary Alliance is absolutely happy to train staff, talk to management. No, we have not. But that is a movement that we are working on doing in communities with larger businesses who are interested. Obviously, the ones that we work a little bit closer with, no, but businesses have rights. So you have a right as an employer, as an organization, of who you let in and what to look for. And we're absolutely happy to provide information, training, just some general stuff. So please reach out to me after. I'm going to keep going. So what can you do outside? You're welcome to talk to me specifically about those things after if that's helpful. But if you have another question that's different, I do want to. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so what can you do aside from videoing? So we need to be responsive and need to move quickly. So Somos Lawrence and Sanctuary Alliance have decided we need to expand our reach a little bit of who is supporting us, who is volunteering us. So we have created a community action and response form. We believe that there are many lanes to this work. You do not have to be boots on the ground. You do not have to be the one putting your body on the front line unless that is something you have the ability to do. So this community form is our way of starting to gather information about who wants to help and how they want to help. So on that form, there's also a paper form if you all are not QR code people. I have a couple. So the couple of the categories are financial support. I know it's a tough one, but we need financial support to be able to run some of these operations. Somos Lawrence does incredible work. We are all volunteer-based. I'm not paid to do this. Somos is not paid to do this. So it's really important that if you have those means, that you provide some financial support if available. Providing space, if you can provide rooms, if you can provide lodging. I won't go into detail with that because that's a conversation we can have down the line, but if you have space or interested in that, fill out that check mark and we'll be out in contact with you. We are bringing back our larger rapid response group, and that is very specific qualifications for that. So if you choose rapid response, this will be folks who have some flexibility with their time, right? You're able to move, to go verify, you're able to answer phone calls. I would say if you have like a dedicated 9 to 5, this might be a hard thing to do, though interaction with immigration can happen at any time. There will be training for rapid response, so we will train you on how to be a rapid responder and kind of grow our network. We are looking for folks, in particular, you do not have to meet these qualifications, but if you are bilingual or multilingual and you have 0 to lower risk of if you interact with immigration, they're not gonna, now start enforcing on you. So we're going to start growing that network. So if that's something of interest to you, please check that, and we will be in contact with those trainings and how we'll move forward. The other ones are resource distribution. So if you have graphic design skills, if you just like to do community education, we would love to partner with you on that. And then organizing and demonstrating, that is obviously going to happen. So if you have training in that, or if you would like to get training in that, what to do if there is protests, what to do if there's demonstrations, how to keep our community as safe as possible. So that is our community action form. The last two things, I'll go really quick because I know we're almost at time. I said financial assistance is super imperative and important, so if you have the financial ability, this is the information on how to donate to Somos Lawrence. That'll be at the back table. There are many ways to provide. They are through Ballard, a 501c3, so you can donate there. Sanctuary Alliance is not a nonprofit. We will never be a nonprofit because I have personal reasons for not being a nonprofit. We will move funding and resources to the folks who are able to circulate that. Last thing, if you want to continue to get information locally on Lawrence and Douglas County immigration efforts, on statewide and how we're partnering with people like KC, this is a sign-up sheet for our email listserv. If you're already receiving emails from us, you do not need to sign up. I don't require any sign-ups at any of these events because I don't need to collect your information unless you really want me to have it. So this is just name and email, and you will just receive information updates on what we're doing, more events and trainings that we're having in our community. This is not the last conversation, so please know we will continue to have and promote efforts to grow our advocacy here in Lawrence and in Douglas County. That's all I have. I think I might have covered all of these except for contact your legislators, but I think y'all are pros at that. So please continue to kind of push for this change, right? Whether you're protesting, whether you're showing up with resources in your way. Like I said, there's many, many lanes to this work. It doesn't have to be the most radical thing you can think of. Of course, you can do that, but know what your skills are, right? If you're a really good writer, can you write copy for someone's press release? If you're an artist, can you create art? If you're loud and disruptive like I am sometimes, can you be loud and disruptive when people need it? There's a lot of lanes. Just like Itzel said, remember your why. And remember that immigrants are not just important when we're in the news, right? We're not just important when a certain administration demonizes our people. They've been doing it for a very long time. This is nothing new. It's just, a little bit scarier because it's ramped up. But we actually have the ability to change. We can create pathways to citizenship. We can care for our community members 24/7, not just when they're in the news cycle. Immigrants are people, right? Before that title, just like all of you, know your neighbors, right? I always say, can you name 5 people that you know that are impacted by this? Broaden your circles, get to know folks, be in relationship with them, and start building trust. That's what we need more than anything else. I mean, we also need a pathway to citizenship, but more than anything else, we just need to be a stronger community. So that's what we're looking for. You have a lot of options. You've been talked to a lot today. Thanks for hanging on. This will be recorded, and the library will provide this as a YouTube video. We will be making social media posts. You can find us on Facebook. That's the platform that seems to reach the most people right now. So more updates. Our listserv will also have emails with all this information. So if you have any questions for us, please let us know. Thank you again to Itzel. Thank you to Gabby in the library. We're here, and I don't think we're going to try not to go anywhere. So I'm going to keep going. Thank you all so much for your time.
Anybody have any questions? So just our contact info again. Like Mariel said, the reporting hotline is only for Kansas City, but if you happen to be in KC, you see something, let us know. But just our contact info also, if you just want to, likewise, donate, be part. There's so many ways that you can be part of AIR if that's something you'd like to. Again, you have your local organization, or if you know people in Kansas City too that would like to be doing something, definitely get involved. We need all hands on right now. So yeah, any questions? Okay, thank you. Stay safe. Drink a lot of water. I think it's really hot. Take care. Take care of each other. Don't take your phones. Just really quick safety stuff. If you're taking your phone, take off any of your facial recognitions stuff on it. Yeah. Or just turn it off. Yeah. Airplane mode. Yeah. Yeah. Just in case anything happens. Just be safe.